My best friend stole my life's work and pitched it to our friends and potential investors as her own. I watched her presentation, smiled, and even applauded. But what she didn't know was that the provisional patent I filed 6 weeks ago made her entire performance an act of fraud. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The clinking of wine glasses sounded like tiny, sharp bells, each one marking a second of my life that was being stolen. I stood near the back of Chloe Sterling's elegantly appointed living room, a polite, frozen smile plastered on my face. My stomach was a knot of ice and fire. It wasn't the flu that had me feeling weak and unsteady, though I had told a few concerned friends that was the case. It was betrayal, a sickness far more acute and debilitating. Chloe was at the front of the room, standing beside a large monitor displaying a logo I had designed in the quiet solitude of my apartment. It was the logo for Oralink, my project, my passion, my creation for the last 18 months. She was radiant, dressed in a sharp, crimson dress that commanded attention. Her voice, usually warm and familiar, was now polished to a corporate sheen, every word a carefully crafted instrument of deception. "Imagine a world," she began, her arms open wide as if embracing the very concept she was about to unveil, where visual impairment no longer means isolation. "Imagine a world where our cities become truly accessible to everyone." The words were mine. She was reciting, nearly verbatim, the opening lines from the project proposal I had shared with her in confidence just 3 weeks ago. We had been sitting in my cramped study, surrounded by whiteboards covered in code architecture and user flow diagrams. She had been my sounding board, my biggest cheerleader. Or so I had thought. I felt a wave of nausea and gripped the edge of a bookcase to steady myself. Our friend Mark, a tech journalist, gave me a concerned look. "You okay, Emma? You look pale." "Just a bit under the weather," I managed to whisper, my throat tight. Didn't want to miss Chloe's big night. His attention snapped back to the front as Chloe clicked to the next slide. It was a mock-up of the app's user interface, my mock-up. I could see the exact pixel I had nudged into place at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, the specific shade of blue I had chosen for the accessibility-friendly icons. She explained its features with a fluency that was both impressive and horrifying. She spoke of the AI-driven spatial audio cues, the haptic feedback integration, the real-time obstacle detection. She used the technical terms I had spent months teaching her, simplifying them just enough for the audience of angel investors and influential friends she had gathered. These were our friends, people we had known for years. Liam, a venture capitalist, was nodding thoughtfully. Sarah, who ran a major philanthropic foundation, was leaning forward, her expression rapt. They were buying it, every last lie. Chloe had been my best friend since college. We had navigated our 20s together, celebrating triumphs and consoling each other through heartbreaks. When I first had the spark of an idea for Oralink, inspired by watching my own grandmother struggle with macular degeneration, Chloe was the first person I told. She had encouraged me, brainstormed with me, and brought me coffee on nights when I was buried in development. She knew every sacrifice I had made, the drained savings account, the non-existent social life, the relentless focus that had consumed me. Now she was presenting my sacrifice as her genius, my work as her vision. As she moved toward her closing remarks, her voice swelled with manufactured passion. "Oralink isn't just an app," she declared, her eyes sweeping the room. "It's a movement, and I invite you all to be a part of it from the very beginning." The room erupted in applause. It was genuine, enthusiastic applause for a vision they believed was hers. I felt my hands moving, clapping along with everyone else in a bizarre, out-of-body experience. My palms met in a slow, rhythmic beat that felt like a mockery. I was applauding my own erasure. Chloe's eyes found mine across the room. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't a smile of shared victory. It was a smile of ownership, of conquest. In that moment, the ice in my stomach shattered and a cold, quiet resolve began to form in its place. She had taken my work, my dream, my very words. The betrayal was worse than the theft itself. After the presentation, a crowd immediately swarmed Chloe. I watched from my corner as she accepted congratulations, her laughter echoing with a confidence she had no right to possess. Liam, the VC, was already talking numbers with her, his pen tapping thoughtfully against a notepad. Sarah from the foundation was discussing potential partnerships. Chloe was in her element, a master marketer selling the most valuable product she'd ever had, my soul. I needed air. Slipping out onto the balcony, I drew in a deep, shaky breath of the cool night air. The city lights twinkled below, a sea of possibilities that suddenly felt distant and mocking. How could I have been so blind? For 15 years, I had trusted her implicitly. I had handed her the keys to my entire world, and she had just driven away with it. The glass door slid open behind me. "There you are," Chloe said, her voice bright and cheerful. She stepped out onto the balcony, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "I was looking for you. We need to celebrate." She handed me a glass, her fingers brushing against mine. I flinched internally but forced my hand to remain steady. "It was an impressive presentation, Chloe," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Wasn't it?" she beamed, taking a sip of her champagne. "I was so nervous, but it felt amazing. People really get it, you know? They see the potential." She looked out at the city, a proprietary gleam in her eyes. "This is going to be huge, Em, absolutely huge." My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the champagne flute over the railing and demand she tell me how she could do this. How she could stand there, smiling, after gutting me in front of everyone we knew. Instead, I took a small, measured sip. "You've certainly put a lot of work into the pitch," I said carefully, watching her reaction. "Months," she said with a dramatic sigh, as if recalling long, arduous nights of labor. "Just trying to get the messaging right, you know, making something so complex feel simple and human. It's a gift, I guess." A gift. The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh. I stared at her, at the face I thought I knew better than my own. The same freckles dotted the bridge of her nose. The same wayward curl escaped her elegant updo. But the person inside was a stranger, a thief wearing my best friend's skin. "So what's the next step?" I asked, my voice a carefully controlled monotone. "You've got Liam and Sarah interested." "Meetings," she said, waving a dismissive hand as if it were all a formality. "Liam wants to see a detailed financial projection and a go-to-market strategy by Friday. Sarah's foundation needs a formal grant proposal. It's a lot, but I'm ready." She was ready to present my financial models, the ones we had worked on together. She was ready to submit my go-to-market strategy, the one I had painstakingly researched. The cold resolve in my chest hardened into something sharp and clear. This wasn't just a moment of weakness or a misunderstanding. This was a calculated, deliberate act of war. She drained her glass and turned to me, her expression softening into a facsimile of concern. "You really don't look well, Em. Maybe you should go home and get some rest. You can catch up on all the excitement tomorrow." It was a dismissal, a gentle push out of her spotlight. "You're right," I said, my smile feeling brittle. "I should." I placed my barely touched glass on the railing. "Congratulations again, Chloe. It was an unforgettable night." She hugged me then, a quick, performative embrace that felt like being wrapped in thorns. "Thanks for coming, Em. It means the world to me that you were here." As I walked away, through the crowd of her new admirers, a single thought echoed in my mind, a quiet mantra of defiance. She thinks she has everything. She thinks she has won. My hand went to my pocket, my fingers brushing against the smooth surface of my phone, but she had forgotten one crucial thing. The friendship between Chloe and me was forged in the fires of late-night study sessions and cheap pizza. We were inseparable in college, Emma and Chloe, a package deal. I was the quiet, methodical coder, the one who found beauty in elegant algorithms. She was the vibrant, charismatic speaker, the one who could sell ice to a polar bear. We balanced each other. I helped her pass calculus. She helped me navigate social gatherings that felt like complex, unsolvable equations. I thought we were a team. After graduation, that dynamic continued. I dove into the demanding world of software engineering while she climbed the ladder in marketing. Our careers were different, but our bond felt the same. We were each other's first call for everything. When I decided to leave my stable job to pursue Oralink, Chloe was my most vocal supporter. "You have to do it, Emma," she had insisted over dinner one night, her eyes wide with excitement. "This isn't just a good idea, it's a necessary one. You could change millions of lives." Her belief was the fuel I needed. I poured my life savings into the project, cashed out my retirement fund, and moved into a smaller apartment to cut costs. For 18 months, my world shrank to the size O. F my laptop screen. Chloe was my only consistent link to the outside world. She would show up at my door with takeout and wine, asking for updates with what I mistook for genuine interest. Looking back now, the signs were all there, hiding in plain sight. Her interest, which had once been broad and supportive, began to narrow. Her questions became less about my well-being and more about the mechanics of the business. "So, who exactly owns the intellectual property right now?" she asked one evening, swirling the wine in her glass. The question was casual, almost an afterthought, but it hung in the air. "I do," I answered simply. "It's my code, my design." Right, she'd said quickly. "But I mean legally. Is it like a company yet? Did you incorporate?" At the time, I saw it as her marketing brain at work, thinking ahead to the business structure. I explained that I was still in the development phase, operating as a sole proprietor until I was ready to seek funding. I showed her my development roadmaps, my user research, my preliminary branding concepts. I shared everything. She was my best friend, and I believed her investment was purely emotional. The true red flag, the one I had subconsciously noted but consciously ignored, came about 2 months ago. I had just solved a major coding problem that had plagued me for weeks, a breakthrough that made the app's core function 10 times more efficient. I called her, ecstatic, and tried to explain the technical details. She cut me off. "That's great, Em, really, but can you just email me the summary, the bullet points, the stuff I can use when we talk to people?" The word struck me as odd. Until then, it had always been you and your project. I brushed it off as a slip of the tongue, a sign of her deep involvement. But a seed of unease had been planted. It was that seed that led me to schedule a consultation with my old university mentor, a seasoned tech entrepreneur. I laid out the project for him, and when I mentioned Chloe's increasing involvement in the messaging, he grew very still. "Emma," he said, his expression serious, "your idea is brilliant, and it's vulnerable. Before you talk to another soul, before you even think about investors, you need to protect it. Talk to a patent lawyer. Now." His urgency spooked me. That afternoon, I found Arthur Finch. 6 weeks before Chloe's glittering presentation, I sat in his quiet, book-lined office and filed a provisional patent for Oralink. It protected the entire system, its methods, and its unique application of AI. It was my secret, my insurance policy. I told no one, not even Chloe. I felt a little guilty, a little paranoid, as if I were betraying our friendship by not trusting her. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. Chloe's polished facade was her greatest weapon. To the outside world, she was charming, ambitious, and savvy. She had a knack for making people feel seen and important. That was her marketing genius. But I now understood that her professional skills were not separate from her personality, they were one and the same. She was always marketing, always selling, always looking for an angle. And I, her loyal, trusting best friend, had been her longest and most elaborate campaign. She hadn't just been my confidant. She had been conducting market research on my life's work, waiting for the perfect moment to launch it as her own. The morning after the party, I woke up with a hollow feeling in my chest, the ghost of applause still ringing in my ears. For a few hours, I allowed myself to grieve. I scrolled through photos of Chloe and me on my phone, college graduation, vacations, goofy selfies. It was like looking at a stranger. The grief was real, a sharp, physical ache for the friend I thought I had. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, the ache began to transform. It sharpened, hardened, and cooled into pure, unadulterated resolve. Grief was a passive emotion. Justice was not. My first call was to Arthur Finch. "Arthur, it's Emma Vance." "Emma," he said, his voice calm and steadying. "I was wondering when I might hear from you. Did your friend enjoy her party?" The question was so direct, so knowing, that it startled a short, harsh laugh out of me. "She did. She gave the pitch of her life. My pitch, to be specific." "I see," he said, a note of grim satisfaction in his tone. "And how was it received?" "They loved it. A venture capitalist and a major foundation are already asking for follow-up meetings." "Excellent," Arthur said, and the word sent a jolt of strength through me. "Let her swim out a little further. The deeper the water, the more effective the lesson. Has she sent you any documents to review?" "Not yet," I said, "but she's on a deadline for Friday." "Good, we wait. In the meantime, I want you to do two things. First, create a complete, time-stamped archive of all your development work. Code repositories, design files, research notes. Emails between you and Chloe where you discuss the project. Everything. Organize it chronologically. Second, do not engage with her about the project. If she calls, be polite, be vague. You're still recovering from the flu. Let her believe you're a non-threat." His instructions were a lifeline. They gave me a purpose beyond simmering anger. I spent the next 2 days in a state of focused fury, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I compiled every digital breadcrumb of Oralink's existence. The first napkin sketch, scanned and dated. The initial lines of code, time-stamped in my private GitHub repository. Hundreds of emails where I had excitedly explained breakthroughs to Chloe, who had replied with "amazing" or "so proud of you." Each piece of evidence was a testament to my work and a nail in her coffin. The process was excruciating. Every email was a fresh stab of betrayal. I saw her manipulative questions with new clarity, her feigned support for the data mining it truly was. But with each document I saved and cataloged, my resolve grew stronger. She had underestimated me. She saw me as the nerdy, socially awkward coder, too lost in my own world to ever fight back. She saw me as a resource to be exploited, not an adversary to be feared. But she had forgotten one crucial thing: I was a builder. And now I was building a case. On Thursday afternoon, an email from Chloe landed in my inbox. Subject urgent, need your eyes. My heart pounded as I opened it. It was a link to a cloud document, a meticulously crafted business plan for Oralink, complete with 5-year financial projections and a detailed go-to-market strategy. It was my work, repackaged in a slick template with her name, Chloe Sterling, listed as founder and CEO. She had written a short, breathless message. You're the only one I trust to look this over before I send it to Liam. Does it all make sense? My brain is fried from all this business stuff, lol. Need my brilliant tech genius to give it a once-over. Call me when you see this." The condescension was breathtaking. She was using me as a free consultant to perfect the very documents she had stolen from me. This was the moment, the turning point. I could call her out, or I could follow Arthur's plan. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and forwarded the email to Arthur Finch with a simple message. The bait is in the water. Then I replied to Chloe. "Wow, this looks so professional, so proud of you. Sorry, my voice is still shot from this flu, can't talk, but it looks amazing. I wouldn't change a thing. Good luck with Liam." I hit send. The trap was now set. All I had to do was wait for her to walk right into it. The next few days were a masterclass in patience. I watched from the digital sidelines as Chloe's star began to rise. She posted a photo on social media of herself having coffee with Liam, the VC, captioned, "Incredible meetings with incredible minds. The future is bright. Oralink Founder Life Women in Tech." The hashtag #FounderLife felt like a personal attack. Every post, every cheerful update was a twist of the knife. Friends called, gushing about Chloe's brilliant idea. "You must be so proud of her, Emma," they'd say. I would murmur my agreement, the words feeling foreign and false. The isolation was the hardest part. I was a ghost at the feast, watching someone else be celebrated for a life I had built. Arthur's advice was my anchor. Patience. Let her create an unimpeachable record of her fraud. The first opportunity to gently shake her confidence came a week later. Liam, the VC, was hosting a small networking event for his firm's portfolio founders and a few potential new investments. He had personally invited Chloe, and she, in a grand gesture of friendship, insisted I come as her plus one. "You need to get out of the house, Em. Come meet some people. It'll be fun." It was a strategic move on her part, I realized. Having me there, the quiet, supportive friend, would bolster her credibility. I agreed to go. Arthur and I had decided this was the perfect venue for a small test. The event was held at a sleek, modern art gallery. Chloe, in her element, navigated the room with practiced ease, introducing me to people as my best friend, Emma, my rock through this whole crazy process. Later in the evening, I found myself in a small group with Chloe, Liam, and another founder, a man who had built a complex AI logistics company. Chloe was holding court, speaking eloquently about Oralink's mission and vision. This was my moment. "It's fascinating technology," I interjected politely, turning to Chloe. "I was just reading about advancements in binaural audio rendering. How are you planning to solve the processing latency issue for the real-time spatial audio? Are you running the AI model on device or in the cloud? Because the round-trip time for a cloud-based model could be a real problem for immediate obstacle avoidance." The silence was instantaneous. Liam and the other founder turned to look at Chloe, their expressions curious. My question was technical, specific, and not something you could answer with marketing buzzwords. It was a question a founder who had spent over a year wrestling with the code should be able to answer. Chloe's smile froze. A flicker of panic flashed in her eyes before being quickly suppressed. "Oh, that's the kind of deep tech stuff that Emma loves," she said with a light, dismissive laugh, patting my arm. "Honestly, that's why she's my genius. I'm focused on the user experience and the business strategy. We have a technical roadmap for all that, of course." Liam's gaze lingered on her for a second too long. The other founder nodded slowly, a thoughtful, almost skeptical look on his face. "On-device is the only way to go for that kind of low-latency application," he said, looking at me, not Chloe. "It's a huge battery drain problem, though." "Exactly," I said, meeting his gaze. "It's the core engineering challenge." We spoke for another minute about potential solutions, leaving Chloe standing silently, her smile now strained. The conversation soon moved on, but the damage was done. A tiny seed of doubt had been planted in the mind of her potential lead investor. Later that night, my phone buzzed with an angry text from Chloe. "What was that tonight? Were you trying to make me look stupid?" I stared at the message, a grim satisfaction settling over me, the first crack in her armor. I texted back, "What do you mean? It was just a technical question. I thought it was an interesting discussion." Her reply was instant. "Don't play dumb, Emma. You know I handle the vision, not the nuts and bolts. You made it awkward. Stay in your lane." My lane? I almost laughed out loud. She had stolen my car, was driving it off a cliff, and was telling me to stay in my lane. I didn't reply. I simply took a screenshot of the conversation and sent it to Arthur Finch with the caption, "Phase 1 complete. She's rattled." The feeling of power was intoxicating. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my work, my voice, and the truth. Chloe's panic made her reckless. Instead of backing down, she doubled down. She started pushing Liam's firm for a faster commitment, citing competitive interest. It was a classic bluff, and it was my signal to escalate. Arthur had been quietly using a private investigator, and what he found was more damning than I could have imagined. "It seems Miss Sterling has a pattern," Arthur said over the phone 2 days later. "Our investigator spoke with a former colleague from her first job out of college. She apparently took sole credit for a massive team project, which won her a promotion. The actual team lead was laid off a month later. There's no legal recourse there, but it establishes a history of professional deceit. It was sickening but not surprising. This wasn't a one-time betrayal, it was who she was. The knowledge solidified my resolve. This wasn't just for me, it was for anyone else she might harm in the future. The final piece of our strategy was ready. Arthur had drafted a formal cease and desist letter, complete with copies of my provisional patent application, key email exchanges, and a detailed timeline of development. But we weren't going to send it. Not yet. We were waiting for the perfect moment. That moment arrived in the form of an email from Chloe. She was ecstatic. "It's happening," the subject line screamed. Liam's firm had been impressed enough, or pressured enough, to move to the next stage. They had invited her to a final partner meeting to present the business plan and, if all went well, sign a term sheet for seed funding. The meeting was in 3 days. "They want me to bring my technical lead to answer any in-depth questions," she wrote. "Obviously, that's you. Please, Em, I need you there. This is the final step. We're so close." The word was a venomous dart. She needed me to sit in a room full of venture capitalists and validate her lies, to perform as the quiet, background tech nerd while she took center stage as the visionary CEO. The audacity was astounding. This was the moment we had been building towards. "Of course, I'll be there," I replied. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." The day before the meeting, I initiated the second, more powerful confrontation. I knew Sarah, the head of the philanthropic foundation, was a stickler for due diligence. I also knew Chloe had submitted a grant proposal to her. I called Sarah's office. "Sarah, it's Emma Vance. I know you're considering a proposal for Oralink, and I felt I had an ethical obligation to share some information with you before you proceed." I calmly and factually laid out the situation, explaining that I was the sole creator and held the provisional patent. I didn't ask her to kill the grant, I simply presented the facts. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Thank you for telling me, Emma," she said finally, her voice tight with anger. "I will look into this immediately. My foundation does not tolerate fraud." Less than an hour later, Chloe called me, her voice a hysterical shriek. "What did you do?" Sarah just called and tore into me. She said the grant was suspended pending a fraud investigation. "Did you say something to her?" "I told her the truth, Chloe," I said, my voice perfectly level. "I told her that Oralink is my project." "Your project?" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I'm the one who made it real. I'm the one who pitched it, who got the meetings. You would have just let it die on your laptop. It's mine now." It was the first time she had admitted it so plainly. The mask was gone, replaced by the raw, grasping greed that had been hiding underneath all along. "An idea is worthless without execution, Emma, and I am the one executing," she spat. "Execution requires ownership, Chloe, and you don't own it. The law is very clear on that," I said, my voice as cold as ice. "I have the patent application. I have the code repositories. I have years of documentation. What do you have? A PowerPoint presentation you stole from me." There was a choked sound on the other end of the line. "You are trying to sabotage me," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "After everything I've done for you." "No," I said, and the finality of my own words settled in my soul. "I'm just protecting my work. I'll see you at the meeting tomorrow." I hung up the phone. The spell was broken. She knew that I knew, and she knew that I was coming for her. The final showdown was set. The boardroom at Sterling and Knight Ventures was an intimidating landscape of glass and steel, overlooking the city from 30 floors up. I walked in right behind Chloe. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her usual radiant confidence was replaced by a brittle, defensive posture. She shot me a look of pure venom as we took our seats. I gave her a small, serene smile in return. Across the vast mahogany table sat Liam and 3 other partners, their faces professionally neutral. My lawyer, Arthur Finch, sat beside me, his leather briefcase resting on his lap. His presence was a quiet declaration of war. "Chloe, thanks for coming in," Liam began, nodding to her and then to me. "And this must be your technical lead, Emma. Welcome. Thank you for having us, Chloe said, her voice strained. We also have your counsel here, I see, one of the partners noted, looking at Arthur. Ms. Vance felt it was prudent for me to attend, Arthur said smoothly, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension radiating from Chloe. Liam cleared his throat, looking slightly uncomfortable. Well, Chloe, the floor is yours. We've all reviewed the business plan. We're very impressed with the vision. We'd love for you to walk us through the final presentation, and then we can get to the Q&A. Chloe stood up, her hands trembling slightly as she clicked the first slide of her presentation onto the large screen. It was the Auralink logo. My logo. She began to speak, but her voice lacked the charismatic fire it had at the party. She was reciting a script, her eyes darting nervously between the partners and me. She was a performer whose main prop, the illusion of ownership, had been taken from her. She stumbled through the market analysis and the user acquisition strategy. When she got to the technology slide, she visibly paled. Our proprietary AI model is the core of our innovation, she said, her voice wavering. Liam held up a hand. Let's pause there, he said kindly. This is where we'd love to hear from Emma. Can you walk us through the technical architecture, Emma? And specifically, the solution to the latency problem we discussed at the gallery event. All eyes turned to me. Chloe stood frozen, trapped in the spotlight she had so desperately craved. I remained seated. I'd be happy to, I said calmly. But before I do, I believe there's a more fundamental issue we need to address, the matter of intellectual property ownership. A silence fell over the room. Chloe sank into her chair, her face ashen. Arthur Finch placed his briefcase on the table and opened it with a quiet click. Gentlemen, he said, his voice filling the room. My name is Arthur Finch, and I am the legal counsel for Emma Vance, the sole inventor and creator of the Auralink system. We are here today to inform you that Ms. Sterling has no legal right to be pitching this technology, as it is the exclusive intellectual property of my client. He slid a file across the table to Liam. In this folder, you will find a copy of the provisional patent application for Auralink, filed by Ms. Vance over 2 months ago. You will also find a complete, time-stamped log of the project's development, including code commits, design files, and email correspondence. This documentation proves, irrefutably, that Ms. Vance is the project's creator. Liam opened the folder, his eyes scanning the first page of the patent application. The other partners leaned in, their expressions shifting from curiosity to shock and then to anger. Chloe, Liam said, his voice dangerously quiet, what is this? Chloe just stared at the table, speechless. The entire world she had built on a foundation of lies was crumbling around her in real time. For the past 18 months, I said, my voice clear and steady, I have dedicated my life to developing Auralink. Chloe Sterling was my best friend. I confided in her. I shared my progress, my hopes, my struggles. She repaid that trust by stealing my work and presenting it as her own. I looked directly at Chloe, who wouldn't meet my gaze. She counted on me being too timid to fight back. She saw me as a background character in her story, but she fundamentally misunderstood who I am. One of the partners, a stern-faced woman at the end of the table, looked at Chloe with pure disgust. Is this true? Chloe finally looked up, her eyes swimming with tears. They weren't tears of remorse, they were tears of defeat. She said nothing. I believe her silence is your answer, Arthur said calmly. He closed his briefcase. We will, of course, be sending a formal cease and desist notice. Any attempt to use, market, or fundraise for Auralink will be met with immediate legal action. Liam closed the folder and pushed it back across the table. He stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. Chloe, this meeting is over. I think it's best if you leave. Now. She stood on shaky legs, grabbing her purse. Without another word, without a single look back, she walked out of the boardroom. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving a profound and satisfying silence in its wake. The show was finally over. In the silence that followed Chloe's exit, I felt a strange sense of calm. There was no elation, no triumphant surge of adrenaline. Just the quiet, solid feeling of the truth settling back into its rightful place. Liam and his partners were in a state of shock. They looked from me to Arthur and back again. It was Liam who finally broke the silence. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice filled with a new kind of respect. "On behalf of my firm, I am profoundly sorry. We were completely misled." "I understand," I said simply. She was very convincing. The stern-faced woman, whose name was Helen, leaned forward. "What she did was despicable, but what you did, waiting, gathering evidence, and handling it with such precision, that was brilliant." She exchanged a look with Liam. "Frankly, it shows a level of strategic thinking that's just as impressive as the technology itself." Liam nodded in agreement. "We pride ourselves on backing the right founders. It seems we were just talking to the wrong one." He paused, a new idea dawning in his eyes. "The actual founder, however, is sitting right here. Ms. Vance, Emma, would you be willing to start this conversation over? From the beginning? We'd like to hear about Oralink from the person who actually created it." A genuine smile touched my lips for the first time in weeks. I would like that very much. The downfall for Chloe was swift and absolute. News travels fast in the tight-knit tech community. Liam's firm discreetly let it be known that she had engaged in intellectual property fraud. The story of her public humiliation in the boardroom became a cautionary tale. Sarah's foundation permanently barred her from any future grant applications and shared their findings with other philanthropic networks. The friends who had once admired her now looked at her with pity and contempt. She was a social and professional pariah overnight. About a week later, I received a package. It was a small, unassuming box. Inside was every key I had ever given her to my old apartment, my current one, my parents' beach house. There was no note. It was a quiet, final surrender. We had one last encounter. I ran into her at a coffee shop far from our usual neighborhood. She looked small and tired, stripped of her usual vibrant polish. She saw me and froze, her half-filled cup trembling in her hand. She approached my table hesitantly. "Emma," she said, her voice barely a whisper, I'm sorry." I looked at her, searching for any sign of genuine remorse. All I saw was the regret of being caught. "Are you sorry for what you did, Chloe?" I asked, my voice even. "Or are you just sorry for how it turned out for you?" She had no answer. She just looked down at the floor, shamefaced. "I hope you learned something from this," I said, not unkindly. "Goodbye, Chloe." I walked away, leaving her standing there, a ghost from a life I had thankfully moved on from. There was no need for further punishment. The consequences of her actions were a prison of her own making. My first official pitch meeting with Sterling and Knight Ventures was a week after that. I walked into the same boardroom, but this time, it felt like my own. I didn't use a single one of Chloe's slides. I spoke from the heart, with the passion and deep technical knowledge that came from 18 months of relentless work. I told them my story, my grandmother's story, and the vision I had for a more accessible world. They didn't just listen, they engaged. They asked smart, insightful questions. They saw the value not just in the idea, but in me, the founder. At the end of the meeting, they offered me a seed funding term sheet that was more generous than the one they had offered Chloe. As I signed the papers in Arthur's office a few days later, a profound sense of peace washed over me. I had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived but thrived. I had protected my work, reclaimed my narrative, and in the process, found a strength I never knew I possessed. The journey of Oralink was just beginning, but it was now, finally, on the right path. And it was mine.